mean. Probably use acronyms on the slide. All the acronyms for special education. So when we say CSE, we refer to the Committee on Special Education. So anytime you are talking about specifically a student with an IEP, it's CSE, or if they're in preschool, it's CPS. When we say a student is classified, that means that there has been a special education evaluation conducted, that students are eligible for services, and they've been classified under one of 13 disability categories, which we're going to go through a little bit later. Some of our programs, so when I say program, it kind of refers to the services that the students provided, so the level of service within the building. So are they in our most restrictive setting in the building? So that would be our skills and achievement class. Are they in a less restricted setting, which is ICT or integrated co-teaching, where there's 2 teachers at the front of the room? We'll go into these terms and what the differences between the programs are a little bit later, but just to give you a little bit of background. And then related services. So related services could be anything from speech services, which we do in-house, to occupational therapy or physical therapy, which we bring in an outside provider to service our students. Okay. So the most important acronym, I would argue, in special education is the LRE, for the least restrictive environment. So it is our obligation under federal and state regulations to provide an education to our students with disabilities in the least restrictive environment possible. So we don't want to put any undue burden on that child in order to provide them their education. So the least restrictive environment is the general education classroom with very little modifications or no modifications or support. So that's our least restrictive. As the continuum gets smaller, you have fewer and fewer students that it applies to. So the more restrictive settings would be if we send a student out to like a BOCES placement, or they need a residential placement where they need supervision 24/7, or even if they're homebound, which is the most restrictive because there's no social component to it. So we have students whose disabilities are so severe that maybe they can't leave a hospital bed. And so those students may be educated within their home. It's the most restrictive setting, and it's what we avoid at all costs if possible. Just to switch gears a little bit, this is our budget for the year. So our operating budget is just a little bit over 2.1 million. And as you can see from the chart, the vast majority of that is paying for outside placements. So our biggest piece of the pie is our BOCES tuition. So we have 7 students who are currently, or 6 students currently in BOCES. We have 1 who is pending a BOCES placement. Beyond that, we have students that we pay private tuition for. So those are students who are mostly placed out of state, who are in a residential setting. Those costs are obviously larger because you're paying for round-the-clock care. And then we have public tuition. So we do pay a couple of local districts for services and tuition. So we have Seaford and we have Lawrence that we pay. And then we have sort of the smaller pieces of our budget are our professional development, our peer mediation drug prevention program, and our supplies and materials. Actually, that's a little bit out of order. Supplies and materials should be right under public tuition. I apologize.
And of course, our personnel costs are not
factored in.
They're part of, say, the teacher code, teacher aid code, within the personnel of the larger budget.
Okay, so by the numbers, so CSE, so I'm just talking about students specifically who have IEPs. So we have 1,100, just over 1,100 students in the district, 1,138 students in the district. 151 of those students have IEPs. That's roughly 13% of our population have IEPs. At high school, the percentage is a little bit lower, it's 12%. So 68 students out of 573. Center Avenue is our smallest special ed population because that's where our ENL services are provided. So most of our special ed population is over at Rame, which is why that percentage looks so much higher. If we split the 2 elementary schools evenly with services, it would be about 12%. We do have 5 students who pay tuition to come to our program. I'll talk a little bit more about them in a bit. And then we have 7 students, as I said before, who are attending BOCES, 6 currently, 1 pending. We have one student in a New York State residential school. We have 2 out of state, 2 in Long Island districts. We have 1 student who is homebound, but he has actually moved and is pending a discharge from our school district. And then we have a couple of students who are currently placed in our public school, St. Mary's.
Just real quick, so you can go back.
Yes, absolutely.
So between Center Avenue and Rame Avenue, and obviously there's a big difference there. Is there a financial reason why why the kids are put in Rame versus Center? Or is there an advantage to?
Yeah, the advantage is that, so if you have a self-contained class and you had, let's say at Center, you have 1 student picking in a self-contained class, and at Rame you had 2 students enroll in the same grade band. So for a self-contained class, you can actually go 3 grades, there could be 3 grades worth of difference.
Right.
So to have, say for a teacher over at Center for 1 student and a teacher over at Rame for 3 students.
So it makes sense to consolidate and just put it in Rame Avenue.
Exactly.
Cost effective, and we do the same thing with our E&L students, is that we group them all because we can service them more efficiently and cost effectively if they're grouped together. Same thing with co-teaching classes.
Does that affect overall state scores or anything to that nature by having the students be the 18% at Rame, or it doesn't affect the state score or anything like that? Does it meaning does it bring that score down?
It could.
And could it, not in a bad way, but would it negatively reflect against, say, Rame Avenue just by looking at it numbers in terms of percentages?
It could. I mean, it could, but you explain those things. That's always a concern in school districts because I think just about every school district on Long Island uses this approach because it would just be too expensive to keep all of the kids in their home school. It would be nice for the kids because they get to go with their peers, but you would have to be a large duplication of services.
Understood.
Even if it's speech or as Mr. Gilly said, the self-contained or you could run an inclusion class with 1 or 2 kids as opposed to 6 or 7 kids. So
it's intelligent the way it's set up.
it is, yeah.
Okay.
And for us, we haven't, we've had such a high opt-out rate, so it hasn't been an issue for us, because the scores are really skewed, because we've had such a high, Mrs. Hecht will talk about that later, we've had such a high opt-out rate for the past 6 or 7 years, many parents opting out of the state exams, so, but it's something that usually when states, it's a delicate subject because you don't want to say, oh, the special needs students are bringing our scores down in one school, but that sometimes is the case. These are kids who struggle, they have learning disabilities, they have more challenges, and so it may, but you also can look at the data. You can disaggregate the special education students or the ENL students, and you can look at only the general education students. So you actually can look at the data, so you really drill down and you can compare apples with apples across the 2 schools. But what is reported publicly is the whole entire school population.
Sure.
I had one real quick. When you said on the other slide that 55% of it was BOCES, that doesn't include like the Barry Tech kids,
No,
right?
no.
Only special ed.
No, it's specifically special education. So this is a breakdown by learning disability. So there's 13 categories by which a student can be classified. So the majority of our students are actually either learning disabled, speech or language impairment, other health impairment, or have autism. So if you look at the percentage numbers, they're all fairly close. Autism, it drops off a little bit. But just to give you sort of an overview of each of those categories, learning disability is sort of the most common. There's 2 models you can use. You can use the RTI model, where you're constantly monitoring a student's progress, you're applying interventions, and you're seeing how the student responds. And if they don't respond, that tells you that there is something greater at play. The student just doesn't want to learn. There's also the discrepancy model, which looks at a student's cognitive levels and their achievement levels, and is there a disparity between the 2. So that's sort of the most common of the classifications. Speech or language impairment is any sort of impairment involving speech, receptive communication, socialization. Other health impairment is sometimes for students who have severe ADHD, or they might have emotional needs that extend beyond typical supports can provide. Autism is pretty self-explanatory. Emotional disturbance is a disability category that is sometimes, I think sometimes as teachers, they see that category and the wording of it is a little bit jarring. But typically students who have an emotional disturbance, it's, typically they have very significant anxiety, very significant depression, they might have bipolar disorder, they might have something that just inhibits their emotional state and does not make them available to learn. Multiple disabilities is exactly that. If the student has more than, it sort of falls into more than one category. Hearing impairment, pretty self-explanatory. Intellectual disability is if a student's cognitive functioning is extraordinarily low, they would fall into that category. Again, it's one where very few students would qualify. Deafness, visual impairment, orthopedic impairment, all pretty self-explanatory. Traumatic brain injury is if the student obviously has an injury to their brain that prevents them from accessing the curriculum. And typically, usually you see it more with students who have, for example, a seizure disorder. And so that's the breakdown by class.
And this is fairly typical of the national distribution. Usually learning disabilities is the highest and usually higher than that. But this is fairly typical in terms of those ranking as the 4 top. And the national average for percentage of students classified is about 12%. So we fall pretty much in line with the national average.
So for CPSE, so our students for CPSE, Nassau County actually, Nassau County funds that. We place the student in preschool that services students with special needs. We're basically just facilitating that. We don't actually provide the services directly, but we have 28 students currently who qualify for preschool special education services. For Section 504 plan, so Section 504 plan is different from an IEP. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the number of students in total in the district is about 4%. It's 51 out of the 1,100 plus students we have. And then a breakdown by school, you can see East Rockaway High School has the highest percentage, and then Center followed by Graham has a very small percentage of students with 504. So, okay, our students in out-of-district placement. So as I said before, we have the 7 MOCEs. That's the breakdown of the different MOCE schools that they are attending. The 2 Long Island districts are Lawrence and Seaford. Our 1 New York student residential facilities at the Charlton School, which is all the way upstate. And then we have 2 out of state. So 1 was just recently placed at Devereaux Behavioral Health in Pennsylvania. That student was actually placed successfully on September 3rd. It was a smooth transition, which we were all holding our breath collectively because there were a number of COVID screenings the student had to go through, and being nonverbal was a little bit tough for this student to sort of understand what was going on. It was a lot of change all at once. And then we have a student at Crotch Mountain, which is in New Hampshire. So that student was previously placed in Mary Haven. Mary Haven closed down. We had to move the student, and so our options were very limited given the age of the student. And so Crotch Mountain accepted the student and then notified us in June that they were also shutting down, which we had no idea about prior. But then they notified us last week, Friday, that they will actually be continuing operation through the school year. So we are trying to move that student to adult services through the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, OPWDD. But we are kind of, we're at the mercy of OPWDD. They have to make that placement. We can facilitate it, which we've done all we can do. So that student will likely remain in that placement until those adult services can begin. And then we have our 5 tuition-in students. So these are all students in our Skills and Achievement or Life Skills program. The reason why they come to us is because their district does not have a program that is suitable to them. We actually have a very robust life skills program, and so the way it works is districts will say, I have a student with these needs, I cannot serve them in my district, who has a program. And our hand-up said we do. They came in, observed our program, felt it was a good fit, and so far it has been an excellent fit for all 5 of these students. They are all flourishing, they're all doing very well with our two very talented teachers and our very talented speech provider in that room, our talented aides. I don't leave anybody out. And this helps us offset some costs. So we gain about $40,000 in tuition for each of those students. So overall, it's a nice sum of money. It's about $200,000 that we're taking in for these 5 students. Okay, so how does the whole thing begin? So for CSE or CPSE, typically what happens is either the parent requests a referral, which a parent can do at any time. Once we receive their request for referral, we send what's called consent for evaluation. Once the parent signs it, they say that starts the clock. So we have 60 days from receipt of that consent for evaluation to have the initial eligibility meeting, which means that we have to conduct all of the testing we need to get done, schedule the meeting with the parent, we have to give them 5-day notice. So it is a time-sensitive process. We can also refer based on our child study teams at the elementary schools or our student support team at the high school. So if we have a meeting, we find that child's not making progress, we've provided interventions, those interventions are not working, the committee then can make the decision to refer the child to the CSE for a special evaluation. For 504, it's a little bit less formal because a 504 covers a wide array of disabilities. So it could be that the child is a diabetic and needs to have frequent breaks to check their blood sugar or to have a snack. And so you don't really need as involved a process to provide those accommodations to the student. You just need a diagnosis from a medical professional. So sometimes, a 504 will also be for ADHD, for example. If the child is struggling, they can't maintain their focus. Once you have that diagnosis, you can convene the Section 504 committee and make some suggestions for accommodations. So the differences between the two, I felt like this was a pretty good explanation. For CSE, CPSE special education, think more direct service. So this is, we cited where a child is struggling, we're providing targeted interventions to try to help that child overcome those obstacles. Whereas a 504, think of it more as access. So what can we do in the building to remove barriers to allow that child to independently access the curriculum and achieve at their highest levels? So there's a committee for each. So for CSE, it's probably the most specific. There needs to be a chairperson. Typically, that would be myself, Mr. Kennedy, or one of the school psychologists. You absolutely must have a school psychologist there. You have to have a general ed teacher, you have to have a special ed teacher, and of course, the parent. In high school, we very strongly, last year, myself, Mr. Kennedy, Dr. Pazina, we felt very strongly the students should be at their meetings. They should have a voice in what their services look like, and so we really pushed that practice last year. We're going to continue to do so this year. But also, we feel like the guidance counselor and the related service providers, these people who are interacting with the student on a fairly regular basis, should also be included in the process. CPSE, very similar. Usually, the only other people that you want there are related service providers, the occupational therapist, physical therapist, speech provider. Section 504 is much more relaxed in terms of who can be at the meeting, and that's because you might have a student who, like I said, might be diabetic, and so you don't necessarily need all these academically minded people there, because really the child just needs the ability to check their blood sugar. So they don't put a restriction on who needs to be there. We generally, especially if it's a more academic case, we try to have a larger team. If it's something that's a little bit more medical, we keep that team smaller, obviously to preserve the child's confidentiality. So just a real quick, I'm not going to read this all off to you. So the programs we offer, so our Skills and Achievement program is our most restricted that we offer in-house. It's a really wonderful program. We have wonderful personnel who works in there. You've probably heard Cafe 217 used, or you're aware of what that is. It's a coffee house provided by those students for our teachers. It's a really wonderful opportunity for people to gather. Obviously, COVID restricts us from being able to do that right now, but we are looking into creative ways that we can bring the cafe back. Our departmental classes are self-contained, so they're just smaller classes which follow generally the same curriculum as the general ed students. although it's heavily modified. For ICT, because half the class are general education students, it is the exact same curriculum. It should be at the same exact pace. Sometimes they do move a little bit slower, and they go a little more in depth in things, but I think that's like the differences between teachers anyway, is some teachers take their time on one thing, and other teachers kind of do more throw. And then resource room. Resource room is basically just a pull-out service, so it's a small group. It can be no bigger than 5. And usually resource rooms are focused on skill building, so it might be working on students' writing or their ability to comprehend reading or their math skills. Brief overview of related services. So we do have behavior consultants who come in. They're ABA certified, so they're experts in behavior. Sometimes they'll do what's called a functional behavior assessment, where they'll look at what are the observable behaviors that a student is doing. They'll create a plan called a behavior intervention plan, or BIP, to help the student modify their behavior. Counseling. This is kind of a misnomer about counseling in schools. Is school-based counseling is for school-based issues. So it's not really necessarily a place to go and talk about stuff that's going on at home. It's more the social aspects of school, pressures of school, things of that nature. Occupational therapy is typically focused on daily living skills and fine motor, work with the students, parent training and counseling. Usually it's for parents of children with autism, but it's a chance to speak one-on-one with a behavior consultant and to work on some problem behaviors that might be coming up at home, that might also be happening in school. Physical therapy is a little bit more gross motor skills, so ambulation, the ability of the child to walk independently throughout the school building. Speech therapy is any challenge with speech, social communication. Sometimes it has to do with the child's ability to swallow. This is the last slide. So this was a cartoon that one of my professors in grad school, he actually made a bunch of these, but I think this is the best one. And it's sort of my philosophy on the way special education can be. For years, we've been building stairs because that's how you get into some place that you need to access that's higher as you build stairs. That's what we've always done. But if you build a ramp instead of building stairs, then everyone can access it. So sometimes doing things the way that you've always done them excludes people. And especially when you're a teacher, if you just think from the beginning of how do I make this accessible to everyone, and how do I make sure that everyone is successful, then you build a ramp and you're able to service them. And so if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Well done. I like your last picture a lot, actually. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Excellent job. Thank you so much.
I do have a question, though, just unrelated to what you just went through.
Sure.
Any of the children in the program experiencing math difficulties?
So glad you brought that up. So I have lost a lot of sleep in the last couple of weeks worrying about our life skills program specifically with their ability to tolerate math, because many of those children have sensory issues, and we were really concerned about it. But they had a fantastic day. There were no characteristic behaviors. I would say the students that we were probably most concerned about thrived the most today, and I'm really glad you asked that, because I meant to mention that when I walked in, but that was, I feel like, our biggest success of today.
That's great. Was there a lot of work done with the home before this?
Yes, so we, like I said, we have wonderful staff, and they keep in contact with our parents all summer, regardless of whether the students enrolled in the summer program here. And we've myself and Mr. Kennedy have been in touch with a lot of the parents. The parents have been training their kids and preparing them mentally. And the parents did a fantastic job. The staff did a fantastic job. I mean, should be very proud of themselves. It really worked out well.
That's great. Yeah, terrific.
And our kindergartners too. They were just precious, and they all had the cutest masks. One that was a bear, bunny rabbit, smiling face. It was just, and they were sitting there just so cute when they arrived. Even when they arrived, all dressed up with their matching masks, and just when I visited the classrooms, they're all just sitting there like, it's just kind of sad that we have to live like this, but they were amazing. The kids were amazing. I guess they've had significant time to practice wearing masks. Probably tolerated better than I do. It was warm today. Thank you so much, Mr. Healy. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you again.
Thank you, John.
Very much.
Thank you so much. September 3rd. Go on to the minutes and agendas. Just a word, the agenda is fairly slim right now because we just had a meeting the previous Thursday, so we, guys, but we will most likely be adding, a number of items before we send it home in this Friday's update. Everybody have your minutes?
Do you have any questions on the minutes on August 25th? Good. September 3rd? And any questions on the September 15th board agenda? All right, so let's move on. Item 8, discussion.
Just one word, we still have not been able to find a music teacher substitute, so we're hoping and continuing to look. It's been quite difficult. And it is through December 4th, so we hope we find somebody because it's an important program. Hopefully by Tuesday we'll have a name.
You know what, with the amount of juggling you did before we opened up, I think that's amazing, to only be down one. Go to a summary of openness.
Yeah, so as I started to say before, things really went incredibly smoothly. It was wonderful to see the kids so happy. You see, really, the kids were at center the time I spent there. I don't know what you saw at Rain.
Same thing. They came in, they were prepared for school, their backpacks, their masks. It was a real smooth entrance. I went back for their dismissal. Got the thumbs up from a lot of students. They were excited every day. Kindergarten had first day of kindergarten
Crowns.
that they were wearing. It seemed like it worked out really well.
I have to give our teachers, of course, and our teaching assistants a real nod because, we went into the classrooms where we split them in K3, and we have half the class in one room and half the class in the other. Teacher is teaching remotely, and then the other class is with the teaching assistants, and they're going to be watching instruction on the screen. They already had the remote cameras going from one class into the other. There were a few glitches with the cameras today, but they're being ironed out. And I have to say, Mr. Rouse and his team were running around like crazy today, making sure everything was smoothed out. And none of the problems were, major systemic problems, but just things that need to be ironed out. The teachers really are troopers. I mean, we have to give a hats off to them for stepping up, for, everybody was a little bit anxious last week, but many, many teachers came up to me and said, thanked us, all of us, which was so gratifying for me, that they appreciated and recognized how hard it was to get everything in order, and told me that they said things like, I was really nervous, but when I got in the building and saw everything, I felt so much better, and I'm glad to be back. So kudos to our teaching staff, kudos to our custodial staff, because they worked all weekend. Mr. Daly worked all weekend. Everything that you did not see that hadn't yet been done was done. Tape on the floor, every class, I don't know, it was like magic over the 3 days. I don't know how they got it all done, but the buildings look wonderful. Signage is up, hallways are with signage. As I said, tape on the floor in every classroom where the desks need to go. Barriers are up, shields are up for the teaching staff that need them and in the offices. So thank you, Mrs. Grio, thank you to Mr. Daly and all of our custodians. They really deserve some recognition. I'm gonna buy them all lunch one day this week or next week, really just to say, you can't thank people enough, because everybody's worked under difficult circumstances, doing things they never had to do before, and yet everybody continues to step up. So we're really fortunate that we have such a wonderful team at every single level, and I'm really proud to be a part of the district for everything we've done, and our parents too. Parents looked wonderfully happy today. I think as the kids went off, they were very happy. Jackie, you were here. You were at Arrival here this morning.
Yes, they were. Kids were very, I was amazed. They were happy. They were compliant. They all showed up with their masks. It was like every day.
We didn't have one student without a mask. Everybody entered the building orderly. Yeah, I was at Center. Jackie was here. Lee, you were here. It went great. The signage outside was great and beautiful. The PTA decorated the lawn. I don't know if it's still up.
Yeah, it's still up, yeah.
It looks beautiful.
Had
Really.
the staggered start, students arriving at, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, had that to work out.
I don't know if, at the elementaries, I don't know if everybody followed it. I think people were anxious. It was the first day. Some people came and, just waited. So it was a little, I think that'll smooth out here.
Yeah, it was very
It was smooth.
Very smooth. They had been doing it all along. Kids just lined up. It was like nothing.
And your oval drop off was smooth too.
Yeah, everything was very smooth. You were there just a little earlier than me. I mean, I got there.
Very true, right?
Yeah, it was-
7:20.
Happy to be back.
Yeah.
I got there at 7, yeah,
There's less than
40.
300 kids in the building.
Right.
So even the hallways were, during passing time, we all went out in the hallways, when the bell rang, just to
Quiet.
monitor.
Yeah, it was quiet.
And it was quiet. It was,
Wow.
you didn't have to worry about social distancing because the kids were small numbers of kids in the hallways.
Cafeteria?
They're not congregating at lockers, they're not using the lockers. So
Yeah.
they were literally just moving from one place to another.
And how much time in between classes?
4 minutes, 4 and 5, depending upon
My
the.
school, they do 10, but it's crazy, they don't, my
That
school.
only encourages them to leave.
Yeah, well, they got there with like 5 or 6 minutes to spare. So I think they're probably changing.
I was in the lunchroom at the high school.
Yeah, I was like,
Lunchroom was great. The kids were talking, but I think they were doing what they love to do best. They were all on their phones. They had their phones out, so they were communicating. Not necessarily next to the person they were with, but in their own way, they were happy. They were eating. It was comfortable. They all looked terrific. Food, the serving line went really well.
Smooth.
It was really, really smooth.
I work in quickly, I still have to go outside like in the past before they have to.
Elementary goes outside, yes.
Yeah, but how about up here too? They can't go in the back at all? Or?
No. I think we want to really, we don't have the supervision, and, the 11th and 12th graders can go off campus,
Right.
but, in terms of congregating, obviously want to keep kids from, congregating really together.
How'd the cleaning go? Notice you said they
I
go.
went fine, we were a little concerned about, the lunch program, but, Mrs. Shape had set it up so that, a few minutes, before the end, you would move the students out and into another area to give the cleaning staff the ability to clean.
They went in the auditorium, the kids.
And it just went quick, boom, done. The guys had plenty of time, they didn't get all the shields clean. They really just went through.
They're pretty neat eaters, the kids. I was watching. It's not like they splashed food on the.
Who knows what happened in the
barriers.
elementary? God knows where the food ended up.
Were they utilizing the paper that you had gotten for the desktops?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if they did
I
it.
don't think
went
in the
around.
cafeteria they did. They may
No,
have
not
done
in the cafeteria.
No, but I
we
did
got
see
them
them
for
out.
the classroom.
Yeah, the classrooms. I saw them out on the table at the entrance, so we were
Yep.
outside. I believe when he came in by the security desk is when they were definitely there for them.
We have 4 teachers, 4 now that are on remote assignments. So we had substitute teachers in those classrooms today, and that's, something I think it went smoothly as expected. Those teachers, again, were providing the orientation. Students, of course, tomorrow, group rock comes in. Today was East, tomorrow's rock. And then on Thursday, the remote, and, the hybrid actually starts. So. Yeah, I think it went really smoothly. I think none of us slept last night.
No,
We were
no.
all
The
anxious
kids did,
about
they look
That's right.
forward.
what was going to happen.
They're resilient.
They really are.
And the teachers too. I think when the teachers saw the kids, they felt, they love the kids. They do this because they love it. And so, everybody relaxed a little bit. And I checked in with our ERTA president. I saw some of the union reps, and they were like, "It's good. It was a good day." I think people were happy.
The hybrid, I started it today. It's definitely a little stressful in the beginning because it's like having 2 separate classes. I had to do attendance for the kids who were there, and then the attendance for the kids that are online. And I'm talking to the kids in the class, I'm talking to the kids online. So it definitely takes some getting used to. I mean, everyone has to do it. So it is what it is.
I think it was smart to do just the in-person orientation today, in-person orientation tomorrow, and then ease into it. So I think by Thursday, everybody will feel a little more comfortable. A lot, you're right, it's a lot.
It's a lot. And you don't realize it until the kids are sitting in front of you and the other group is online, and then you have to deal with both of them at the same time. How it gets a little stressful. But I think it will be easier with time. And as you get used to it, it's gonna be all nice. Yeah, and it'll be fine.
The other thing is too, to get to know all their kids. That was the biggest fear this year. If you don't get to know your kids, if something goes down before you go out. Last year, at least they knew their kids in March. Trying to get these bonds now is really important. That's why it's social emotional at this point. It's really great. That was a great idea to open up the year this way,
Yeah.
with these type of small groups and get to know each other and talk about issues that are involved in their life before you get into the group. Hats off, because I think this is terrific. One question I just hit before, and I didn't ask it. The K through 3, so you have the teacher aide, you have the teacher. Now,
Teacher assistant
yeah,
in
teacher
one.
assistant, yeah. They swap like every other
That's
day.
what I was thinking. too.
The teacher swaps,
Yeah,
yes.
the
The
teacher
adults
swaps,
swap, the
yeah.
kids stay where they are.
I would imagine that's great.
Right.
That's good.
And the kids all had bins, where they put their materials. They're all, teachers did an amazing job. The rooms, you saw the rooms, but all these big bins that you saw, they all now are labeled with the kids' names on them. And when I was visiting the classroom, they were explaining to the kids were terrific. They're putting their materials in the bins and setting up, and they look fine. As you said, they're resilient and kids adapt, so probably more easily than adults do. It's a new world, and we're certainly not dinosaurs here in East Rockaway, I'll say that. We all are going with the flow and more.
But those teachers started today with the synchronous instruction into the other group. So from day 1, if their class was split, the other students saw them on camera today.
And that's the entire day, right?
Yep.
And then they swap tomorrow.
Yeah, I wish I had started that way, to get each kid, at least each group one time in person before I had to see them remotely.
Mhm.
We didn't For me, the worst part is my new kids, my sixth graders, I haven't seen their faces. I'll never learn their names because I can't see their faces. And that's the worst part. You can't, once they're not wearing masks anymore, I won't even recognize them because I've never seen their faces. So.
When when I went in one of the classrooms, we talked about how we smiled with our eyes, and it was so cute. He said, "Can you tell I'm smiling?" They were really so adorable.
Okay, any questions? Good. Let's move on to the intramural athletics.
Okay, so I don't know, Mr. Volpus, if you want to kind of move the athletic along with this conversation.
That'd be great, yeah, we can do that.
Okay. So I know if you want to talk about the athletics first, and then I can talk about a proposal, that Mr. Barth has about some after-school fitness workouts kind of intramural, if, in the meantime, while we're still, athletics are still pending. So do you want to go first?
So, I sent home to all the board members today, you saw the letter that was sent off.
Mary made
Island
copies.
Trees, and Mary gave the letter, I gave you that one tonight. And I had a conversation with the board president, and by the way, he had reached out to me to know some information about how the whole thing happened, from nuts to bolts, because he had information that really wasn't accurate. So I went through all the accurate information, let him know, and then 2 days later, I got that letter from him, like everybody just got today, saying that they were moving in the direction. Just so we all know, is that an appeal cannot be made at the section level. An appeal cannot be made at the state level either on this particular one. And the reason why it falls out of the appeal process is because when the governor said September 21st, everybody can return to sports at that point in time, okay? Each member school by the New York State Public High School Athletic Association was told that they are a member belonging to the New York State Public High Schools. It's their decision as a member if they want to not enter athletics, if they want to enter athletics, okay? But that membership comes under the section. So therefore, if you're coming under a section that has already said, we're going to do our season in the spring and divide it into 3 seasons, and that was one of the option plans, then that's what you're bound to in that section, okay? So that's where we're really at. There was some inaccuracies in the letter that he had put out there to everybody, and when you read the letter, I'm sure you all read, you can see it becomes an idle threat, because as a school board, I'm not certain anybody wants to be spending money right now on trying to bring a suit to the state association. That's not going to really it's not going to work, because Robert Zayas in charge, he's already told that if they bring a suit, it'll just they can bring a suit, like we all know, everybody can bring a suit, but it's not going to go anywhere. So I just wanted to make sure you guys were all, aware of that. And then if you had any questions for me, because I work in the office there, if I can help you with that, it's certainly.
So basically, it's not changing, even if they feel,
Not necessarily. So superintendents now. So you have the executive board to athletics, which are 5 superintendents. They have, these belong to the superintendent's union, Nassau County superintendents. And then you have a state association. So those 5 will be impressed by the members of Nassau County superintendents that, you know what, we have a lot on our plate. The plate's full. Let's make a decision early about athletics. And that's when they made that decision, all right, at that point in time, not to, all right, begin right now. They were going to delay the start and consider using the winter, I should say the spring 3 seasons, consider it. Well, there have been quite a few, hundreds of emails that I have as the superintendent's committee has, and they have been reaching back. I know that people have been reaching out. You have Laura Curran reaching in there. The political world has started with their, all letters to us. So there's been quite a bit. And when I say not really, because they did say from the beginning, we're gonna put this out, this is where we stand, and if things change, we'll need to meet again. So that's really where it is right now. There will be another review, I know that. Where the review may go, I'm not too certain. You know, we just, like everybody else, you go along with what's currently happening, you try to move it from there. Two big things that the superintendent's committee hangs their hat on, I think they were so right in making the decision, was the data. What's gonna happen now? Well, we just saw, you know, all places shut the other day. You know, we have a few cases that are going around. So as that goes on, they wanted to really assess what it was to open a school building, and then within your own community or your pod, okay, what was happening there before they said, okay, now let's start visiting other school districts and let's see what happens there. So really it's about the data and how that data will come through this next week. And hopefully if the data stays, you know, great. And there are no things and all this amount of talk has happened and parents really voice their opinion, maybe there'll be a different opinion. But right now, it is what it is. Okay?
Do you know when Section 8 committee will meet again?
We're meeting as a high school association this Friday. That's all the athletic directors. So that's their next meeting. And then on the 16th, okay, we have the meeting with what we call our athletic council. And then the state, Robert Zayas comes down actually on the 16th and 17th on meeting. So he comes down the day before. He'll probably do it Zoom-wise. He goes around to the state every year. He goes around to every section. So that's our date then. And what we're doing now in Nassau is compiling a question and answer, okay, to directly give to Mr. Zayas when he comes down that day, because the governance that came out, which is it took every sport, and what it did is it made it ready for COVID, meaning all the things that they need to follow in that particular sport. And there's still questions that are in that one, particularly soccer, for instance, which was classified as a moderate sport. So it speaks about if you close it in 6 feet, you must have a mask on. But yet then it turns and says, but if there's no toleration for a mask, the student athlete doesn't have to wear a mask. So now, you know, it becomes a play on words, you know, I'm having trouble with my mask, so I wear my mask or not. So there is a concern with that, about the mask on soccer itself. And as we all know, volleyball and football is still talking, if the 21st was the date you're open. By the way, you don't have to open on the 21st. Superintendents in Nassau County can say, well, maybe we'll open on October 1st, or maybe the 27th, if it ever came to that. Whatever that decision would be their decision, all right, with the athletic association, Section 8 athletics. Okay, so.
Now, that's the decision, that's those 6 superintendents or 5, whatever.
5.
They make that decision.
Well, how they reach back to the superintendent's committee, okay, is up to them. You know, it could be consensus, it could be an outright vote, but that's totally.
They also discuss it with the athletic council.
They can discuss that with the athletic council.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I know there's a question to where we stand as far as the board and superintendent in the town. I know you saw a couple things. I mean, if we're allowed to play, we play, correct? As far as we're concerned. I mean, I know we're all very sports oriented, and sure, I would love to see the kids play, but I know there was a big question out there. What is our stance? I didn't want to answer that. I'm not going to answer anything, but I said, you know, I'll talk to you guys and say, I think our stance is, of course, it's safe and we're allowed to do play.
And I think, Joe, with that, I'd just like to reach into Lisa for a second, you know, to find out, you know, how does David feel, you know, from his aspect as the athletic director?
Well, I can't speak, you know, we've only spoken because the, you know, the decision was sort of made for us by Section 8, you know, holding off. And so, of course, I support that decision, and David supports that decision. You know, we can't run athletics without being a part of Section 8. And so the decision was made for us. I agree that I think you need to do one thing at a time. I think it's most important that we open school. We look at how things are going. I think one of the concerns by the superintendent's group, and it was, you know, the executive board actually made the decision. It was not a meeting where it was discussed with all 56 districts, and they are elected to that committee, you know, to do that. And so, you know, these 5 superintendents, at least 3 of them have been, or it's been a change, but at least Mr. Grishman's been on Section 8 for many, 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 many years, and we trust their judgment. I think one of the biggest concerns was that in phys ed, we have to be 12 feet apart. And we have to be very limited in terms of how we do physical education. And so sharing a ball, being in closer contact did present a concern. And so I know Mr. Barth is anxious, of course, to have our teams and our kids. We know how important it is to our students to play. We know our kids are disappointed, as they are in every community. And so we just want to do it safely. So I do trust the judgment of Mr. Lopez and the executive board. And I think it's a prudent approach to wait and see how things open. As Mr. Lopez said, we have, we already had a school district that had a spike in a group of a large number of kids having COVID, testing positive. We certainly don't want that to happen in our school community because that could shut our schools down. So I think it is prudent to take a measured approach and evaluate the data as we move into September, and keep our fingers crossed that, it really does take a community approach. And so if our community members are listening, I do hope that, parents use good caution and use good judgment with their kids to encourage their children to wear masks and not have large gatherings, so that what happened in Clark Place doesn't happen here. It could happen anywhere, but we hope that we continue to practice good judgment, and then our schools will be able to open, our athletics will be able to go forward, and our kids will get back to as normal as possible. So, I think it's a measured approach.
Definitely so, and the superintendents that were on that committee really shouldered a tough burden for the whole community of superintendents, and they knew that going in, that they were going to bear that burden. And I have utmost respect for starting off the way we wanted to start off by saying, let's see the data, let's get schools open. We're an educationally based, athletics in high schools are educationally based, and that's what it exists for. It doesn't exist, as we all know. Everybody thinks their kid's going to get a college scholarship. It's not about that. It's the education base that's behind it. And the superintendents, really back that up. So we'll be visiting as we move along. So that answered all the board members.
Is there a chance that certain sports could potentially move forward and that others would be postponed? Like, would they break it up, or would they just kind of blanket statement and say fall sports are canceled going into next year?
So you have the two sports that are the high profile sports, football and volleyball. Those two conceivably could never open. All right, if the governor doesn't give the okay for them to open, they could be pushed to possibility of the spring. And just think about this for a minute now. If you push them into, say, that we have the model of 3 spring seasons, March, right? But they were the only ones that were pushed to spring 1. Then what would happen is those athletes that are playing football, then they're going to have to make a choice between playing the other sport, right, and lacrosse.
Yeah, sure.
So that was one of the bigger things too, that the section realizes that, if we move, we want to move everything together. We don't want to just move fragments of sports. And we certainly don't want to happen what happened this past year, which was in the spring, we eliminated all the spring sports. Those other 2 seasons played last year.
Right.
So it was really to be fair to every student athlete, whatever sport you play.
What other areas of the state also delayed?
Right now, we were the first to come out with it. This week, there's supposedly more now that are going to be coming out. All right, now that happened just today. We had each executive director's office was filing into one document to see who's doing what. Right? Are you going to open on the 21st of September, or are you going to delay it? And right now, that's being calculated, so we should find that out by the end of the week as we move forward.
Thank you. Well, we'll stay tuned. So, again, this is a hard decision to make, but we did start the conversation. A number of districts did already look into starting some kind of intramural opportunity. So Mr. Barth gave me kind of a very broad proposal so that we could consider if the board would like to do this, giving students an opportunity to participate in kind of after-school fitness sessions while they wait for interscholastic season to begin. So I asked him to put together a few thoughts and ideas. He thought that, of course, again, and this is if things stay as they are, that maybe in the beginning of October, when we expect our extra help to begin, and we've taken a measured approach in our own school with rolling out extracurricular activities. Mr. Schaefer and I had a conversation. I asked him what clubs he would recommend continuing. Can certain clubs continue remotely? Can they continue via Zoom? Because we have the issue of the building being occupied after school, making it difficult for the custodial staff to clean and disinfect all of the rooms. So we would need really to be very prudent in where kids met, what rooms they were in. Again, we're trying to keep kids' circulation as limited as possible, but we do expect some of our clubs to begin. We're going to have our class advisors will be meeting with students, again, in an appropriate way. So, and that will probably begin the very beginning of October, because we want to make sure that we have all of the routines down for our regular school day. So he would be looking to maybe in the beginning of October to begin some kinds of appropriate workouts, move by using the winter workout stipend position that we have, allow that to begin in October. It typically starts in late November. Allow individual teams to begin voluntary off-season workouts. Workouts would follow the Department of Health recommendations and use limited equipment that's cleaned by the coach after each use. All workouts would be outside when possible. If indoors, it would be modified to ensure students can wear masks when participating. And a schedule of workouts and students participating would be created to ensure that proper health measures can be followed. There would be no additional cost to the district, but due to the fact that the number of participants in each session would be limited, again, depending upon what we choose to do, it could be, again, not that we have a lot of additional funds. I always look at Jackie. She's my
Just to
husband at
see if
work.
I've passed out yet. We'll see.
Yeah, money already budgeted. Although I don't ask my husband to spend anything. I'm more afraid of Jackie. Possibly, no, we have saved monies on supervisions, for instance. At this point of the year, we would be having a lot of workouts. We would be starting games shortly, so we would be paying teachers for supervisions. None of that is taking place, but if we did want to expand it, if that were economically feasible.
Can we see an extended proposal from him of what he's recommending and what he's thinking, and can we review it with your permission on the 15th agenda? Grace coming up, maybe you can come and give a little presentation or something, 5 minutes.
How about the waiver? Is it like gyms are open 25%?
That's my next question.
Are the kids allowed to work out in the weight room? Like if you take, say, 50% of the football team one day and 50% of the volleyball team, as long as you keep within that 25%.
It's a great idea.
By the way, what you're all talking about,
Yeah.
David is very well informed on all of that, because there's a listserv and athletic directors talking to each other. So they're all talking about different plans and different programs. I think your suggestion is great, because that'll give him an opportunity to
Prepare.
from what he wants to see each Rockaway do at that point in time. There were some really creative ideas about, for instance, seasons would be shortened if we moved to the spring, but the allotment of money would have been already appropriated for, say, the varsity volleyball coach. Well, then, if that coach wanted to run that intramural and be charged that intramural, X amount of hours, however Jackie wants to break that salary up, they could be given that, and it's not going to cost the district any more money. So there were some really good ideas.
And procedures too to that to make it extra safe, like the little temperature guns and masks and so on
Well,
and so
all of
forth.
those stand for every sport, they're out. COVID-19, all right, sport came out. So in other words, every sport has a certain directives when we open up. So that's all out. David has all of that. So he'd definitely be the one that make that presentation. I would like to see that, you know,
I think
and
that
let
would
him
be
be the guy who brings it to us.
We can also help them along the way too.
Absolutely.
Would you like to have, like a work session at 6:30 for him to meet with the board to discuss
Let's
that
just add it
next
to the
Tuesday?
Let's just
You
add it
want
to
it at
the
the
actual
public
meeting when it
meeting?
starts.
So we have a public meeting that night.
Oh, you're saying,
So
so.
we need a work session before the public meeting to meet with him, to at least.
It would
Yeah.
allow a better
Makes sense. Yeah,
dialogue
sure.
than.
Sure, if that's the best way, then
That's
yes.
a good idea. That's a great
We can
idea.
get the kids together in any way as a team, just to keep the team together and the whole, you know.
Concept.
Yeah, the concept.
You don't want them to lose a whole.
You don't want to lose,
season.
yeah, it's
Working out, but the
it's
camaraderie.
just camaraderie, it's important, it's team building,
I agree.
teamwork,
It's you don't have to keep that, you know, all of a sudden I'm going into this sport, having been off for
So
X
that
amount
would be a
of rounds,
6:30
that's
work
where
session?
the result of that.
Prior to the 7 o'clock meeting.
Prior to 7 o'clock.
Yes.
meeting,
And we would need it here.
Dominic, I couldn't meet with my cross country guys. But, and we were supposed to start the 21st. The governor said we could start the 21st. It was so technically then, can the teams meet informally or no?
If that school did an intramural with cross country, just
Yeah.
take that process, and they did a running intramural with them.
Right.
Open up to the whole student body, and obviously you gotta put so many per day, because you can't overcrowd, all those things that David would do, you could do that. Oh, sure.
But I mean, like, I would always meet my guys informal, like just for runs. Probably can't. right?
And that has to open up to the whole student body,
Okay,
all right, because at that point in time, the team, as a team exists, a preseason workout
It's-
type of thing.
right.
Got it.
I like it.
I do too, I'd like to hear David, and I'm sure he'll be creative with that, so, good idea. All right,
Okay, great.
curriculum presentation, 2020-21.
Okay.
Yes, so, most board meetings during the school year, we include a curriculum presentation near the start of the meeting. And so I was going to go through some of the proposals for next year, and if there are any other presentations that you'd like to hear us programs that you got. We've done a lot over the last few years, we presented on those. So on the curriculum website, they're all in there, so if you have an afternoon or evening and haven't seen them in the past, then you can go online and catch up on those. So this year, our first two board meetings, there are other topics to be addressed, the reentry update, of course, next week, and then the Board of Education recognition, as well as the introduction of our new staff in October. So November would be our first curriculum presentation officially, and we are going to include one that we had on our calendar last year and didn't get to because of the COVID shutdown. So Mr. Rouse and the Technology Committee have been hard at work over the last year plus, looking at the technology expectations both for students as well as for staff members. Now that our students have devices at so many grade levels and we have really increased our expectations of how they should be used, we wanted to make sure that we had some clarity related to what students should be doing at each level and what teachers should be doing and how they should be utilizing the technology. So that is a work in progress, but something that we wanted to make sure was, continued to be looked at and was also shared with the board at this point and the community to show the work that we've been doing. So that was something that I said was on, I think, the March agenda last year, and of course got postponed. The December presentation is on our new reading program, Wonders. We talked a lot about that change from Journeys to Wonders. Our teachers are starting to implement that program, so we wanted to make sure that after a few months of implementation, we bring that to you and to share where we are with that, what the program looks like, and all the exciting elements of that. January, we thought it would be a good time for a bond update, so that in February, we would bring another curriculum presentation, which is the guidance plan. That's something that's up for approval next week at the board meeting. That's something that's updated each year and shared with the Board of Education and then approved. And so Mrs. Bonaccorsi, the guidance department, later this winter can share what that looks like, what components, how that's being delivered, depending on what state we're in at that time. March, typically the strategic plan update is at the beginning of the year, but because we're moving toward designing that plan, March will be the time to look at the next steps for that. And then that brings us to the budget adoption and budget hearings and all of that spring part. So, again, the proposals, those are the things that we did to share at this time. But again, if there are other recommendations or requests.
I think it's great. This is something I saw in the paper, and I really liked it. You know, the Board of Ed recognition on October 21st, since this was such an unusual year, COVID-19 brought so many tremendous accolades. People really stepped up and above and beyond. And maybe we could do something that night where the building principal of each one of our schools selected a staff member to put as the COVID-19 hero of the building, or however they want to term, but something that, you know, like the Board of Ed recognition, you know, we know while we're here and we do what we do, but I'd love to turn it back to the buildings, you know, and to people who really go above and beyond their service and say, you know, let's recognize people. And then, you know, bring the Herald in that night and do some really nice PR for the district. So I know it's tough when you try to single people out, and I you know, sometimes that's a real tough thing to do because you always slight somebody no matter how you try. But I'm just throwing it out.
And even just like the custodial staffers here over Labor Day weekend, I'm sure they wanted to be home. I know the feeling. You have to get a job done. You have a certain amount of time, so they had to be in. I saw my son drive in Saturday morning. I'm going to work. I just happened to meet him at a light. You know, 6:30 in the morning. So he was here all weekend.
And he comes like an hour.
Right. So he said he stayed at his mother's house so he could be here on time. I stopped at the light. We talked for 2 minutes, but just back of house people. I don't call them back of house people that aren't always in the spotlight. I think that's a great idea.
I think it's a wonderful, actually.
Because again, we recognition. We don't need recognition.
Right.
Give it to them. I mean, they're the ones here.
And give it to them. Look, you know, maybe we can reach into the community and get some sponsors or something. I don't know, some gift cards.
You'd be surprised how much just a little gesture like that for guys, just morale boost.
You know what the PTA got us in cars and whatnot last year, maybe instead turn that over to them.
Yes, I agree.
I feel funny seeing it,
Yeah.
like, you know, we do this because we want to, you know.
Right.
But I agree, it's a great idea.
Just maybe, you know, your administrators, you know, you throw it around and bat it around, see what they come up with, something to really recognize the employees of the district who, you know,
Especially this year.
Special, yeah.
One sitting right there. He's been working all life.
Exactly.
I mean, seriously. Behind the camera, the man behind the camera.
Who's the man behind the camera?
I would elect
Don't.
every one of my administrators.
And you all deserve
Single
it.
any of them out.
Yeah.
They've all been outstanding.
And my wife forced me, she said I wasn't allowed to come to work on Monday, but I was here over the weekend with Jim, my
And your
kid.
wife was also here helping.
She was
you
here. She was
clean
here. My
keyboards.
daughter Emma,
So she-
you know, wiping down those Chromebooks, getting ready for distribution. It's like a family effort.
It makes perfect sense in a district like this.
Yeah, I think that's great.
It's great.
I will follow up. Is there anything else that the board would like us to present upon? You know, Mr. Volpez had asked, you know, for a presentation on special education. Is there any particular department or program that you would like to know more about, that you would like to see in more detail? Would you like to hear from any particular administrator or club or program?
The possibility of doing, and it's not really even that big, because let me get my thought out first, you know, is we have new principals, you know, and one of the things that we've discussed in the past, how do we really get to know them? Well, we're always in large groups and we really never get to know them. So maybe they could select, you know, one night, it's a principal presentation and we just go with that and they get to pick whatever they want to present to us as highlights of something that they're proud of in their buildings. You know, and then this way we now see that, wow, this is really something that they're proud of, something they've instituted in the building. and that we're really bringing it forward. We're getting a chance to know them through that, because obviously, when a principal gets behind something, they believe in it, and they really want to see that, for the district. So maybe it could be a principal's presentation, like where it's like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes each, and nothing too crazy or long, but something, yeah. No.
It's nice.
Putting them on the spot.
Yeah,
Like, just
it's
in an informal way, like, just
Yeah.
to get to know.
And maybe over 3 meetings, or maybe like 3 different work sessions, each one of them they come in and they just talk to us
Oh, you
about,
want to do a work session?
Yeah,
whatever.
without,
It's more intimate that way.
you're right,
Right.
without putting any undue pressure on them. It's just very informal, just to.
I mean, I think it's great because I know that they each have done things in their buildings or within a department that's not necessarily something that's been discussed district-wide, but a particular focus that they've had in their building, an instructional focus. How have they gone about cultivating that and supporting that and growing that? And so, yeah, I think they would all have something to talk about that they've been working on. Yeah, that's great. We can do that do that at a work session.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's a nice way to get to know them.
Anything else?
Hey, Blue Ribbon School certification, be great schools.
It should.
Put some information together. First and foremost, highlight some of the things that we have been recognized for. The first is the Schools of Opportunity. We were a recipient a few years ago, and this was created really to identify and to recognize schools and districts that offer more than some of the more narrow recognition programs. And so you can see from the 10 selection criteria that are listed here that the recognition process really took a deep dive into a lot of different areas. And we recognize schools, like I said, that have closed the gaps and provided opportunities for students and really created equity and access for students. That's something we've been committed to for quite a while. So we were really proud to see that recognized as a school of opportunity. And if you turn that page over, you can see at different levels. We were a silver recognition school, and that's just a screenshot. We're still listed on their site, and that is a recognition that we received for the many things that we've done to advance our students. And the second one that was mentioned at our last meeting was the Advanced Placement Program, the AP Honor Roll. We did nothing, we didn't have to apply for that. They came to us because at the time they recognized that we had increased in student participation in the AP program, and we also had maintained or improved the number of students getting 3 or higher on those exams. And again, that's a screenshot of us being recognized in the 4th annual AP District Honor Roll a few years ago as well. So, we're proud of those things. At the time, we recognized them and celebrated them. And I think, like everything else, you move along and you think, okay, we're busy, and and time goes by. But those are 2 pretty distinctive recognitions. But you had asked about the Blue Ribbon schools and the grade schools. So I put some information on Blue Ribbon schools and 2 ways that schools can be recognized, or either the exemplary high-performing school district, or school, I should say, school building, or an exemplary achievement gap closing. And there's a lot of criteria here, but basically, if you look through those pages, you can see the percentages needed, the top 15% within the state. But the bottom line, which I highlighted just before we get to the grade schools, is that nominated schools must have assessment participation rates of at least 95%. So with our opt-out rate over the years, and that started in 2013, it really kicked in 2015, and has been pretty strong across the island since. We have seen greater participation in state assessments each year. So we went from greater than 2/3 opting out to closer to half and even less than 50% in some grade levels opting out. So we've seen that increase. Of course, last year we didn't have state assessments, so we're kind of on hold to see where we will go from here. But right there, for the elementary level, we will need to be able to qualify for that. The secondary level, all of our students have to take Regents exams. So we have 95% participation rate. But we are still focusing on some of our academic areas. We talked about them openly about math and science, and we're working on those areas to improve those outcomes. So again, that's something that we are still working hard on, and perhaps down the road, if we see the gains that we see in some of the other areas out of those Regents exams, we didn't have those either last year in June or in August. So we'll see this coming year if we do give Regents results.
Did you say we couldn't do it at for the younger kids for rain? I know Senator, you had it at some point, right?
2009.
That was prior to the new assessments,
Mhm.
so we need 95% participation.
Would there be a way, because I know it sounds very difficult because a lot of people opt out and so on and so forth, would there be a way to collectively engage the community and the parents and let them know that, again, I'm not saying do it now, COVID's insane, it's nuts, at an appropriate time, engage the parents, engage the community, say we're looking to acquire this blue ribbon certification, or however you want to word it, and try to get people involved and say, if you do opt in, we have an opportunity to get this blue ribbon certificate, hence raising property values and so on and so forth, or whatever it is everyone thinks. Or is that such an uphill battle that you think it's a waste of time?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts on that. One is, I think we would have to be careful with that, because you're right to say we would have an opportunity, but then if we don't reach that,
We'd have to set the standard up front.
right,
If we have 90, if it's 95, you say, if we have 98%
we can
participation,
apply.
we can apply.
But
Yeah,
then
yeah, of
there's
course.
other criteria in terms of achievement that we may, and we're hoping, we've done many things over the last few years to increase achievement. We have a new reading program. We had a new math program. We've hired math AIS. I mean, I could go on, I don't want to take the time now, but I could go on and on with all of the different things that we've put in place in order to raise achievement. And I know, unfortunately, sometimes things do take a little bit of time. So for instance, to raise achievement in the high school in math and science, more in math, our kids, we recognized were not coming into middle school prepared for advanced math. They were not really ready for even 7th and 8th grade math. The kids seemed to be doing okay in elementary school. When they came up here, they were failing. And then they were not prepared for algebra. And so everything really is almost taking a couple of steps backwards and waiting a few years until things catch up. So I think it's certainly great to have aspirations. I just would be careful because it could take a few years for us to get there. The other thing that we
Better
have...
late than never, though, right?
No, absolutely, but there are other things that we have started talking about in terms of participation that might be more prudent to start out with, is that the new ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, which took the place of NCLB, does penalize us if we don't have 95% participation. And
So maybe that could help.
yeah, and so we're hoping that that will help parents to get back on board. But you do have a lot of parents who are staunchly opposed to assessments. And we have been told numerous times that there's, parents do tell us, and I'll be honest, that we are, that they don't really feel that the value of a school district should be measured only by the test scores, that they recognize the value that this district has in many other ways. And so
I don't disagree. I think there's tons of value.
And so it's a difficult conversation to have, because it's not faith that people don't have faith in us. They do. They don't have faith in the state assessments because of Race to the Top and because of the APPR And until the APPR, which is the teacher evaluation system, became uncoupled with student test scores, it's become so political and so deeply rooted in things other than student achievement that it's difficult to bring people back.
What
And
was
it's
the acronym
almost
that
like,
you used?
excuse me?
What was the acronym that you used for the?
APPR, it's the Annual Professional Performance Review. And that is the teacher evaluation system that several years ago, the state, as part of the Race to the Top money that was, this was during the Obama administration, monies were made available. John King was the commissioner, and he applied for the Race to the Top money. And in order to get that money, districts had to implement an APPR that was tied to student achievement scores. And that's when the whole New York State opt-out movement became really a force, because many parents did not agree. Well, many parents are teachers, and teachers really, and many administrators did not agree that those tests adequately measured the value and the performance of a teacher, that you can't reduce a teacher to a number. And so it became, unfortunately, they rolled both out at the same time, the Common Core and the APPR, and so it was poorly planned.
Sure.
The state used almost, at least in my opinion, I'll only be speaking from my perception, the state used almost all of the APPR money to put out an RFP for student data dashboards, which created another loss of trust between parents and school districts because of data privacy. And parents were very concerned about how Pearson would be using their student data. And that's when this perfect storm resulted in parent opt-outs. And so it's very deep rooted in a lot of mistrust in the testing companies, the companies that devise and develop the tests.
Right.
And even, the regions. Parents wanted to opt out of the regions. The only reason they can't is because they won't earn a diploma, because right now New York, that's tied to their graduation requirements. And so, last year was the first year that we were rated on the new ESSA accountability system, and we are penalized, or we will be penalized for not having a 95% participation rate. What we have seen is that now that the administration has changed a little bit, and the APPR was sort of decoupled for the last few years, the state kind of put a moratorium really on the APPR. More parents have started to take the tests again. And of course, last year, the year before, we had a little upward swing in participation. Last year, the tests were canceled. We don't know what's going to happen this year. And so we were pleased that more parents decided to allow their kids to take the tests, but it's become, very political, and I'm not taking a stand on anybody's views.
Sure.
There were a lot of mistakes that New York State made when they rolled out both the APPR and the Common Core at the same time in the testing. So it's a complicated issue, and people have very strong feelings about it. So I would be hesitant to tie increasing participation and dangling kind of an award, because I don't know if that means that much to a lot of people, because I think people who love this district. And I have been told, we've been told many, many times, I don't care about the test scores. I love this district because of what it is, although we are continuing to, behind the scenes, do everything we can. And we have shown improvement over the years in our achievement. So, it's just a thought that something like that might be difficult to get people on board, but doesn't mean we still, couldn't see what's going. Like this year, again, the application is not even up.
It's not even up, so
Because there's no data from last year upon which to base it.
Sure.
So
So if
we
anything,
can-
that gives us an opportunity
Mhm.
to maybe try to get a 95 participation rate when it gets rolled out again, and let people know that it could be very beneficial to the district. That's all it is.
Mhm.
If nobody wants to participate, that's fine, and we table it forever, or we can look at this as a potential opportunity to get a very prestigious award that will also raise not only perception, but it'll be in alignment with everything that you're already doing in terms of trying to raise the district in every way it works. So it's just a thought, and I see that there's definitely uphill battles in trying to go after that, and I don't recommend we do it right now. What I do recommend is that once they start to roll this out and we see what happens, COVID situation, and hopefully there's not any spikes or anything like that, then we can table it until another time. And you guys say hold off until we have a better understanding.
Mona has some other thoughts.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah, just to get back to the participation rate, remember, we do have to work toward that 95% that is expected. And as was mentioned with the US accountability measures, we are measured by that. We were fortunate because we have had a continual increase in participation. We've also had continual increase in performance, which we're really happy to see.
Outstanding.
Better than universities are doing as well. But we're not at 95%. We hope that we will continue to increase, but we also, districts who are not there have to do what's called a participation rate improvement plan. And we were not planning this year to do that. This past year we didn't do that because we had that increase. So as long as we have a certain percentage increase each year, then we're not on that list, which we were happy. But there are a couple of other options that I've included here, and one is accreditation, which is Middle States Association has accreditation for both elementary, secondary schools as well as higher education institutions. And that's a long process. That's really a self-evaluative process where districts really invest significant numbers of years to not only apply to be accredited, but they go through this process, which is included on this timeline here, where they express an interest, apply for candidacy. There's a visit done to the school district, school building, get approved, then go through a self-study where you're really evaluating how we're doing it, and then again going through a multi-year process to really create an improvement plan within the district. So that's something that the district may want to consider. Again, maybe a little bit down the road, if that's something. It's really a growth process. It's something not only to earn the accreditation, which is an important thing, it's also a process to get there, so that there's real need in that accreditation.
I've been involved with that many years ago when I was at St. Francis Prep, and they do it all the time. It's very self-rewarding. The committees, they're all made up of committees, of self-evaluation. And you get an area, and you and your committee work on that area, and then you make your presentation to the group, and then they put them all together. And it's heard by a panel of people who come in. And it's really, like you just said, it really allows the district to self-evaluate and look at itself. So I think there's a real reward in that. Even if you don't come out with the status of the blue collar, at least you can work at it. And they give you a feedback. The committee itself feeds back to your committees about what you need to work on, which is great too. So
I think that's really in alignment with trying to get to the best you possibly can be. I mean, I see it all. Let me ask a question, because obviously I'm not an educator like you guys. I mean, what is the most prestigious one out of all of these? And again, I'm not recommending we do anything at this juncture, or even in this remainder of the calendar year. Which would be the best for the district, in your guys' professional opinion?
It's a good question. I would probably need to think about that, because I would want, something that, as Dom and Mona pointed out, something that brings real value.
Absolutely.
To improve from the inside out. Sometimes test scores alone put a lot of pressure on teachers. You're kind of hanging something over teachers' head, and because, just to point one thing out, is we are a very small district, and so our cohorts can differ greatly from one year to the next. And when you say, oh, this is a wild bunch, this is a real, I mean, you hear people characterize groups of kids in those ways, and sometimes there's validity in that. And you could have a particularly strong cohort of kids that are going to do very well. You have 80 kids in a graduating class, 85 kids. Sometimes we've had 74 kids. And then we've had cohorts that maybe were not as strong. And so it's difficult to identify trends in a very small group, a small
Sure.
sample size.
That makes a lot of
So
sense.
that's one of the disadvantages for us about continuous progress. When in a larger district, you can see trends and the variations in a cohort don't have as strong of an impact on the data. For us, if you have a class of 85 or 80 kids, each kid represents 1.4% or
Right.
something like that, and that can pull a score down. And we've seen that in our scores from year to year. Some of the courses, we have such a small number of students that the goal was just to increase, like chemistry has been a particularly challenging area for us. But the participation rate in chemistry was maybe 45 kids took the exam. So, you know, you have 45 kids each year. That's really hard to pull up and to make a continuous upward trend
Sure.
when those 45 kids can be so different every year. When you have a very large sample size, there tends to be more homogeneity in terms of, or at least more of a bell curve in terms of the way the students place out along a curve. When you have 45 kids, you can have a group of particularly bright kids or particularly average kids that could impact the outcomes. And so that's why for us, it's hard. And that's not an excuse because we've been still pushing forward and we've still been looking at individual item analysis to look at trends in terms of where our kids were strong, where our kids were weak. And we've been able to identify certain particular concepts or themes or units of study where our kids were more challenged than others. And we know that that may have to do with the teaching, it may have to do with the curriculum, it may have to do with the resources.
Sure.
You know,
It
there's
could be all three.
right, exactly. And there's three reasons why, you know, when you analyze, you know, academic strengths, it's either the kids are prepared for, you know, they have the prerequisite skills, foundational skills and knowledge that they need. Is the curriculum robust enough and appropriate enough, and is it aligned to the standards? And then 3, do the resources or the textbooks or the course of study or the you know, the way the syllabus is written out, does that support and align to the assessments? And so those are the 3 areas that you look at. And then sometimes it's all 3, sometimes it's 1. And we've looked at that and we've provided professional development for our teachers. We've purchased new resources. We have new science textbooks and math discovery textbook that, you know, your kids have. We've also looked at better preparing our kids moving up from the elementary school so that they have the foundational skills necessary to math. And math is very, science is very dependent on math. And so they're very intertwined, which is not surprising that those are weak areas for us and that we've struggled to move forward, but we do expect that to start to take hold. So, you know, it's hard. I think anything that has a really thoughtful evaluative process, like Don was describing, there's a lot of value in that because it's also very collaborative and you have control over it because you're engaging a group of people who want to come on board to engage in that process. So I would say something that might do that might be something worth investing in rather than something that is more difficult for us to control, like a test, you know, like an individual test score.
Okay.
But again, you know, all things are on the table, and when, you know, we would hope that when we do have to increase the percentage of students, and we've talked about this last year, we talked about a board meeting when we went over our ESSA results, and we don't want that to harm us because down the road, we also could lose money. If districts do not improve their participation rate, the state sets these, what's called a MIP, measures of interim progress, right? I always forget what it stands for. If we don't show growth and the state education department sets the amount that we're supposed to grow by, if we don't meet those MIPs, you know, we get penalized. And right now, they removed the financial penalty, but down the road, it's possible that we could lose federal funding if we don't improve. And so we have started that conversation last year at board meetings, and you know, we had planned on talking at PTA meetings about it because we certainly don't want the district. We can't afford to lose a penny.
No way. Right.
Right.
Maybe that's something we think about, talking about as the strategic planning meetings. You're adding that component in there, how we use that number.
Yeah,
That's good.
and that could
It's a
be a
great-
goal. I mean,
We should have raised that number. It's gonna help either achieve this or continue to make sure we don't lose any money, or it seems like it's a no-brainer. We have to engage the community to get to that 95% rate.
I love that idea. It'll work well.
I think we're far enough away now from all of the anger from the testing, 5 or 6 years ago that I was one of the people angry about it.
Yeah, exactly. We probably all were, but I think maybe if we flip the approach to it a little bit.
right.
I don't want to say sell it, but present it as a positive thing for the district, that there could be negative implications if we don't do it. And that's what you're telling me. So, I mean, it
Yes.
makes sense. Even if we don't
Right
even
now,
approach the
there's
blue
not.
ribbon, it seems that there could be negative implications. So it's better to strive to at least get that 95%.
I mean, we've talked about it. We could risk, aside from the money, which money is not, they took it off the table and they said, right now, there will be no financial penalty. But initially, when ESSA was written, there was.
Right.
But they decided to kind of give a moratorium on it. But there would be a chance of the district being identified as a district. They've changed the names now, but
Targeted, or
it's like a district in need of improvement status. Right now, our status is we're in good standing. But if we don't continue that upward growth and participation, for no other reason than participation rate,
Sure.
we could be cited as a district that's not in good standing. So we have started that conversation, and again, COVID derailed that, but we had planned to, talk to the PTAs about it.
That's probably the best way to get it out there. Have the, all right.
Good, but I think Chris's idea is great, to tie it into the strategic plan, because that's an ongoing discussion. And that's where we're setting our goals in the district, and if we keep it somewhere where we're setting our goals, it's not gonna go away from us. We're not gonna forget about it. We're like somebody, just looking for an award, and then you forget, it's always gonna be there. So if we can make that part of the strategic plan
Yeah.
and ongoing, it'd be great.
If I could just say one more thing, our building principals all have had building action plans since we initiated the strategic plan. Each department and building has a plan, and part of the plan is to identify, goals within each of the 4 areas. And under achievement, the building principals have always set measurable goals to increase performance on the state exams, to increase performance on Regents exams by measurable increments. And so, as well as on the NWEA, to increase the number of students who perform at proficiency levels, to increase the passing rate by whatever X number of points, percentage points. And, those were goals for all 3 of our principals over the last 5 years. And they have met some of those goals. Again, participation makes it impossible because in the 3 through 8 state tests, because, when 35 to 40% of kids don't take the test,
Right.
What you're left with is not a representative sample to make goal, to goal set. So
Yeah,
we've then shifted our focus to the NWEA exams. And we have met many of those goals along the way.
Okay, we good with this?
Yes.
Very good. All right, driver's education.
So, let me just pull that up from the weekly update. I sent something in the update. This, again, the state has created a difficult situation for us because they're allowing the driver's education to move forward with the classroom portion, and they've given us different options. Well, not really, with the driving portion. So initially, we could certainly provide the 24 hours of classroom instruction because that can be taught virtually. They've approved that and we're allowed to do that. And they will allow parents to sign off on the 24 hours of laboratory, which is in-vehicle instruction, as written in the guidance. So basically, I included what the guidance said, but I'll read it to you to refresh your memory. The the 24 hours of lab portion of instruction due to COVID-19, programs that began in the spring of 2020, or programs that will begin in the fall, or thereafter will now have the option allowing students to complete 24 hours of in-vehicle instruction under the supervision of a parent or guardian holding a valid New York State driver's license, if COVID-related circumstances, i.e. social distancing requirements, do not allow students to enter a vehicle with a professional driving instructor, either in, well, that's not necessary. So we contacted our attorneys, and our concern and our question is, because the driver education program is under our school district, if an accident were to happen while the parent was driving their child and providing the driving part of it, would we have any liability? And could we develop a waiver where the parents could waive their right to sue the district if they were driving with their child in the car and their child had an accident? So we are investigating it with our attorney. It's a complicated issue. We could have some type of liability because it is a district-run program. So our attorney has not yet gotten back to us. We are also looking at what other districts are doing and how other districts are handling it. So then we looked at providing the driving instruction in the cars, and our instructors would like to do it, but if we put as many as 2 kids in the car, they would not be, even one driver and 1 student would not be 6 feet socially distanced. And that's where the rock and the hard place is, because the state has not waived the social distance requirement. We also discussed, well, what if parents and the instructor waived, could they sign a waiver?
Right.
And the attorney does not advise us to do that, because we'd be violating social distancing laws, even if kids had a mask on. So we're still waiting for our attorney to get back to us on this, and we're also waiting for New York State. It said the driver's education, it said here, let's see, New York State, because we contacted New York State, has raised the need for clarification on in-vehicle instruction with a driving instructor and the number of students allowed in the vehicle, which is a public health and safety issue with the governor's office. So the department is not authorized to address issues of public health and safety. Once the governor's office and the Department of Health make a determination, we can then update our guidance. So right now we're kind of stuck. So we can move forward with the classroom instruction, but as far as the driving part of it, I'm not advising that we move forward. And I think unless the attorney could draft something that would end our liability with the 24 hours and then the parents, but the district has to sign off on that because it's a district-run driver's education program for children who are under 18.
So if I just comment on that, being a former driver ed instructor, you have 6 out of those 24 hours, 6 in the past was with the driver and teacher involved. So you did 6 hours with me. Those other 18 hours, your parents signed off on.
Or you're watching.
Say it again?
Or you're watching. It's observation hours.
With the observation in the car,
Yeah,
right?
right.
But the parent still has to sign that when they're under the age of 18. Parents still have to sign off on that, no matter what. So that, you know, that whole 24 is not as big as you think it is. It's 6. It's really what it was. But I think that in that guidance also recommended that the school, and this is the part that I sort of had a red light on, is that the school district was responsible to make sure that the curriculum for the 6 mandated taught hours was put out to those parents to follow. And I just sort of shook my head, so I don't know how, you can't really follow that. You know, how can you really make sure the parent took those 6 curriculum lessons that were, and then part of the curriculum, like go out there and they're going to be on the other side without a break, you know, doing that whole deal. It's a pretty tough go. And I think that we're putting parents in jeopardy too by, you know, saying that, okay, we'll present the classroom, you know, but it's up to you to finish it up, and we'll accept that. I'm not too certain how much you should move forward with that. I think we owe it to the kids who were disrupted last year because we had students in the spring, I understand, right?
Yes, and they paid.
I think we owe it to them, once we get some kind of decision coming back, hopefully from, the governor's office, that we'll be able to finish them off, If the governor's office makes a decision on socially distant, that's gonna change for everyone, I'm sure we can then offer it. But just to get them through, I think those parents need some assistance, because I believe we did collect money from them, and they totally paid for them. Did they get reimbursed?
They did not get reimbursed yet. We were waiting to see if parents asked for a refund. I think 1 or 2 parents asked for a refund, and we were going to work with them to give them back their money. And the other parents kind of were waiting to see if we would continue the program for them. So, again, that at this point, I think the attorney had concerns about us signing off on the parents driving, like what you're saying, and also would there be a liability? And again, they're not trained instructors. You go, in order to be a driver's ed instructor, you go through a course. And so you're doing it by the book, whereas we can't attest to the fact that the parent, like Tom said, has done it. So, as you said, we could probably meet the requirement and not, it wouldn't cost us that much more if there were 2 kids in the car, because they only need 6 hours behind the wheel and so many hours of observation, but it still doesn't address the social distancing requirements. So right now, we're really on hold, waiting for that. Some districts have gone ahead, and they are doing it with 2 kids in the car. I don't recommend that we do that. I think we're violating the regulations if we do that. It doesn't, and our attorney advised us that we should not until New York State weighs in. But
I don't understand why a mask wouldn't be good enough. Kids, say there's 3 kids in the car, they're wearing masks. I mean, we can go on the train, go on a bus, we have to wear masks. I understand, I know it's children, it's a little different, but.
because the school guidance says that,
Yeah.
because it's a school-run activity, and so we have to follow the guidelines of the guidance document from SED, unless they waive that.
So right now, if I understand right, Lisa, you're waiting to get back from Florence, right?
And SED.
And SED. So why don't we just put this on our next agenda, keep it on, and see where that's going? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Visit you.
I just wanted to see how the board felt. Again, our instructors have been flexible. They said if it were allowed, they would do 2 kids in the car. They would feel comfortable wearing masks. But again, it still doesn't seem to be something that we can bypass.
Yeah.
So.
Do you know if we're still going to be offering the permit test for the kids?
I can't recall.
They can offer that at any given time. As soon as it's an online test, and we have the
There was
rights to
there's
that.
only one, or there's something, right?
No,
I'll look into it and I'll put it in the
Soto,
update.
we should throw to him. He's the one that's last, that I handed it down to him, that license.
Okay, I'll put it in the update. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Is that a big loss of revenue if the program doesn't run 2 years in a row, or two school seasons in a row?
It's a self-sustaining
Not much,
program. We don't make money
Don't
on it.
make any money.
So
It's just
all
kind of
paid
a pass-through. It pays for the instructors and whatever fees, we don't make money on it.
Understood.
It's a service we provide.
Okay, policy 8635, information and data privacy.
Okay, so I took the liberty of, for some reason, I guess Friday was a little bit of a busy day, and Mary and I and Lee were communicating. We wanted to make sure this policy was good to go. We had worked on it with the policy subcommittee, and this was supposed to be adopted over the summer, but the state, because of COVID, gave us a reprieve until October 1st, and we did not put it on we forgot to put it on the agenda. Somehow it got lost in the shuffle. I apologize for that. And so I took the liberty of kind of tabling the field trip policy since we're not going on any field trips. I thought we could put that on the October agenda, and in lieu of the field trip policy, since it's not as urgent, discuss this policy because it does need to be adopted by October 1st. And so we would need to put it up for adoption. It's on review. We discussed it, Pete, Kristen, and I invited, since Lee is here, and I also had invited him to speak about the policy. Basically, this is a new requirement based on Ed Law 2D. We did a presentation to the board on this last year. It's definitely on a lot of parents' minds. And again, it is a requirement that will protect, we have to adopt this policy, and it's something that will protect our students, our teachers, and I'll let Lee talk for a moment about it. Do you have a copy?
Yeah, I brought one. This will only take about 2 hours. I don't know, I'm just gonna stand over here. I like being behind the camera, but, so basically, state laws, new regs say that we have to do, certain things to protect the data that we deal with. We deal with a lot of data. We have to keep it safe and secure. We have to plan what to do if there's a breach, and we have to explain how to notify the authorities. Basically, we want to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover data when necessary. So there are a lot of different things in this policy, but one of the key things is to make sure we're safe and secure with data. One of the things I did over the summer was to redo our password username policy. It's been quite a heavy lift, heavier than expected. So I changed all the passwords, all the user IDs to follow a universal format. So it's first initial, last name. When I got here, we had some first initial, last name. We had some kids with like full first name, full last name, which is really not the best way to have an email, especially for a kid. And also the passwords, some of them were the student ID, which is really not a good thing to do. You don't want the student ID associated with the Google account. If there was a breach, that student ID is like a state identifier, so we don't want that out there as well. So these are some of the things I've done to change things. Regarding third-party contractors, so when we enter into an agreement with a third-party contractor, a company like Discovery Education, in the past, we did not have to get them to sign off on a data security and privacy agreement. Now, the new regs state that we do. In the past, teachers could pick a free program and use it. When I was in the classroom, wow, this thing sounds good. I'm going to use it. I'm going to sign my kids up for it. We can't have our kids sign up for programs unless the company signs off on the data privacy and security agreement. So it's a process. The teachers aren't happy necessarily that they can't use some of the things they've always used, but things have changed now, so we just have to make sure that everything has, there's, they signed up on the agreement.
We have to be compliant with.
Right, exactly. So I told them, don't shoot the messenger. It's not, I'm sorry that you can't use program, X, Y, and Z, but it's a reg. We have to be in compliance. We have to make sure we train on, every year I start off the year, every school year I start off explaining to the faculty about data privacy and security, watching for phishing attacks, different things like that. This is also ongoing training. You don't ever want to send like a spreadsheet with students' names, student IDs. You wouldn't want to send that via email anymore, because what if somebody grabs it, forwards it accidentally out to the world? So you have to be careful with that. I'm not going to bore you with all the intricacies of it, but we basically have to be safe and secure with our data. So this policy sets us off on the right pathway. It's a long journey, so there are a lot of different things we still have to do. We have new firewalls, we have a new filtering system. We're making progress. We've changed a lot, even since I got here. What is this, my third year? So we've changed our filtering system. We got new firewalls. We're going to this Azure in the cloud system. So if there ever was a cyber attack, we can kind of like push our data if we wanted to the West Coast. If there's something going on the East Coast. So I'm not gonna go over everything, obviously, but I just want, you to be aware of this.
And we did, if I could interrupt, Lee, we did use the NISBA sample policy. We subscribe to New York State School Boards Association policy subscription system. And so whenever a new policy or a new law comes out, they develop the policy and then we use their sample and we adjust it and edit it slightly, how it
We had our
meets
attorneys
our
look it
needs. Yes,
over as
so
well.
we used the NISBA policy, Lee went over it, we presented it to the subcommittee, and our attorney also reviewed it for accuracy and gave us the green light to go ahead. So it's really not a lot of flexibility here in terms of the policy, because every district must comply with this. And so maybe some of the titles of the people in the policy are specific to our district, but pretty much any district that you would go on their website will have almost the identical policy, because it's really a required policy by law and it follows Ed Law 2D requirements.
Right, so it's basically boilerplate,
Right.
and it is, we have to comply. So,
We're going to adopt next week.
Well, if the board agrees, I apologize that we didn't send it home Friday and it wasn't on the agenda, but if you'd like to take it home, look at it, if you have any questions, you can ask them since we're gonna have a 6:30 work session. And if you don't, if it would be okay if we adopt it, because otherwise if we wait till October, it will be past the October 1st deadline. So we certainly want to.
This is push forward to adopt. Put it on the agenda.
Thank you. As I said, it's really nothing that we developed personally for us. And actually the subcommittee did. And so I'll just quote, I remember from a few years ago when we started the subcommittee policy subcommittee, excuse me, I'm getting tired, because we have a subcommittee, the whole board actually entrusts puts their trust in the subcommittee to do the policy work. And it's really up to the board if they want to ask questions, but that you do give them the authority by the means of establishing a subcommittee to do this work.
So then we put it on the policy, and since that's the case, that you can do it, we put that policy up, that the two policy subcommittee members get that big paycheck.
You do. You get the policy subcommittee. I think, Jackie, that goes out how many times a year?
That's funny.
Because they do such a great job. But of course, we want to be inclusive of the board and just run it by the whole board, because I think it's the right thing to do, but we don't actually have to.
Okay, the last one, a quick debriefing. I was on the Congresswoman Rice meeting, and it was very interesting. It's the first time that she got together with districts and asked, before she goes to Washington, what are some of our concerns, what's going on now with COVID, and she got an earful. She's playing this out, she got an earful. But I have to give her credit, because she said what she would like to do is NISBA sponsored, and NISBA, she would like to do a monthly meeting, okay, extended out to all boards in Nassau County, that whoever would like to go in on the meeting to bring concerns to her, so that she's more prepared when she goes to Washington, which I thought was really good, So that was a good part of the meeting there. A bad part of the meeting was that, she played, of course, she has to do it, everybody understands that, a political party, and started, blaming the Democrats versus Republicans and all of that. And one person said, you know what, no disrespect, but we really came here to give you our concerns. And if you can bring those forward, that's what we appreciate. So we sort of got resented there. But I texted Lisa during the meeting, she wanted to know specifically how many remote students that we had and how many hybrid. We had 84%. We have 84% hybrid and 16% on the remote this coming school year. And she was trying to use that as real numbers going down there to say that we need money. I spoke about how we took back money from FEMA when FEMA was here, and the school district kept going after the monies that were available from the federal government to make us whole, and that helped us tremendously to make us whole over the years. We want something like that to be happening now, and she said we are trying to get that done, but again, it's taking time. So they do have that in their sights there. I went over all the costs that it's costing us in the district now. Jackie had provided me with Lisa all of the notes to talk about that. You know, already we're estimated at $205,000 for PPE, shields, hand sanitizer, and just there. She was very interested in knowing that how a small district like East Rockaway was able to survive. And I said, well, you're eating up our reserve fund. I mean, you're eating up our funds that are coming from projects that we had, reallocating capital projects that we had, so we can no longer do those projects, you know. We have a very good business manager, I'll give you a little plug there, that was able to put away this money. And then the monies that we were putting away, we also got penalized in the past because we had too much in the reserves. So we're really trying to get something equitable here. And, you know, if you can do that for us, it's terrific. We talked about a little bit about the school nutrition. I brought in there because that was for HEROES Act, and how $3 billion of emergency funding for the school nutrition programs was included in the HEROES Act. I want to see that going forward. She said absolutely with that. And then the last thing was, which is very interesting, maybe you help me out on this, Jackie and Lisa. She talked about the private school were eligible to receive forgivable loans from the Paycheck Protection Program for payroll expenses, but we're not. Is that right?
Well,
know,
yeah, because they're a private entity and their revenue comes from tuition. And so if parents don't attend and they don't pay tuition, they don't survive. Whereas, although we're getting our state aid cut, it's kind of similar, and there's no bailout for us right now. You know, they could go under. They're like it's a private business, so it's just like any other business entity that has been harmed by COVID, and they're not getting the revenue. They're not doing business because parents have, I guess, some parents withdrew their kids, and they said, if I'm getting only remote, then I'm not going to continue to pay tuition. I don't know how private schools charge and when they charge.
Yeah, I don't know what they get.
Same thing with colleges.
So parents may have paid already for the whole year when COVID happened, and they wouldn't get a refund. But I know that some parents have taken their kids out of parochial and private schools, anticipating that if they go on remote again, that, they're not sure what they're paying for. I mean, I know St. Raymond's enrollment is down. It's very low. And they were just saying, I just read an article, I didn't read the article, but I saw the headline, that some parochial schools may not reopen, they may not survive. So.
But anyway, that was really the gist of it. And the nice part, like I said, is they're supposed to be arranging monthly meetings now, so I'll keep you more aggressive if that happens.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for representing us.
You're welcome.
She has offered, we have met with her superintendent in the, in her district. And of course, it's always about money. It's always about, additional aid. It's always about, increasing funding for like IDEA. We receive grants from the federal government, Title I, Title III, Title IV, and then special education grants. Special education is under IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, that was enacted in 1979 when I became a special education teacher, and it was supposed to be a promise of fully funding, and I believe it's still only funded at 17%. So we do get a very small amount of state aid from the federal government for special education, but it doesn't, what the budget is, and that doesn't include, the budget was a little over $2.1 million without staff, without special education staff, which is huge. And we get maybe $360,000 in federal grants in special education. That's it. And that was, education of students with disabilities was a federal mandate. I mean, a wonderful thing and a necessary thing, but they had promised full funding, and it's never come. And that's 50 years, 41 years. So we always ask for money. Whenever we need it.
Okay, that ends our agenda. Thank you very much, everybody. You don't say anything.
So we are meeting live next week, right?
yeah, until the board changes